On this feast of the Epiphany of the Three Kings, we receive in the Gospel from Matthew a story of conversion. For we hear that in this experience of coming to Bethlehem, the three magi go home by a different way. They are changed. But it's not a conversion from sin, but rather it's another kind of conversion, one that we are invited to enjoy as well in these days as we begin a new year. Their conversion, first of all, is about looking up into the heavens and seeing a much wider expanse of where God is working. It reminds us of Abraham being invited to look at the stars of the sky and try to count them, because that will be the number of his descendants. So too, we are invited to look up at all that God has in store for us in the many years to come, not only in our lifetime, but what he has in store for humanity. People have said time and again that humanity, in the course of all of the creation of the world, is really in its infancy, that God has so much more in store for us, and we should not give up hope or become discouraged simply because we have setbacks, that God has a bigger plan for each one of us. But there's also a conversion that takes place as we see that they come and they tell Herod what they have seen, and so he goes to the chief priests and the scribes and hears from them the tradition of the scriptures that Jesus is to be born in Bethlehem. And yet it takes these magi to find the Christ child. They in some way build on this wonderful tradition that's there. I've often thought of this particular text as I look at the ministry of Pope Francis. He's telling us to make sure that we have a tradition that's alive, that can grow, that in some way can be better understood. He often likes to quote Gustav Mahler, the composer, who reminded us that tradition is not a depository of ashes, but rather it's the preservation of a fire, of a flame. And so too, we have here in this wonderful reading an example of how the tradition of the church must always be that which grows, which develops. And that is what the Second Vatican Council wanted the church to do as well, to realize that the tradition of our church is not a depository of ashes, something of the past to be guarded, but rather we are, through God's own Spirit, to develop it, as we have seen time and again throughout the history of the church. And finally, we begin to see as well that the conversion that takes place for these magi also includes how they understand that they now are part of God's plan, that while they are not part of the faith of Abraham, there is something that they are able to offer and to bring to the Christian faith that we celebrate here today. Some weeks ago, I had an opportunity to visit with a new community that we have here of Arab-speaking Christians. They were Palestinian Christians. They were from the first community, the descendants of the first community in that nascent church of Jerusalem. And in speaking to them, they pointed out to me that one of the great blessings that they enjoyed from the various early days of their church was an understanding that they had to go beyond their own boundaries of Jerusalem, beyond Palestine, and appreciate the gifts that other cultures bring to the life of the church. And so too, it's important for us to appreciate the diversity of our Christian heritage, the diversity of the human family, and not see it as a threat, not see it as some kind of point of division, but to appreciate that the diversity God gives us in the human family and in the life of the church allows us to really appreciate the many ways that God is working in the world. And so today, let's respond to this call to conversion, to see how God is opening our lives to something new in this coming year, and not be afraid of it, but also to look for ways in which the Church can continue to develop its tradition and also appreciate that great diversity that is ours in the life of the Church. Not to be afraid of changes, nor of people who come at faith in a different way, realizing that when we do so, we'll be like these three kings, these magi. We can always return home by a different way.